We began a consideration of faith and our human need. It's an exposition of the presence of sin and how the law functions to reveal that sin to us. We closed with a story about a village preacher who, in quoting from Jeremiah, where it reads, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. He responds with a prayer to the Lord, saying in part, we believe that man does not will to do evil, but fails only from lack of knowledge. So there is the liberal perspective on our relationship with God. I got an echo here. I'm going to mute Mike for a moment here because that's the only one that's open now. There we go. Okay. So there's this idea that the fault of man is with his lack of education, and the remedy is improved education. And so you see this emphasis among liberals on education, public education, access to advanced degrees and these kinds of things. And all this is designed to reform and improve society as people are educated. And the problem is they become, without a transformation of the heart, they become more educated to do evil. So anyway, what Machen points out is that, let me put this up on the screen for you here, sorry. What Machen highlights is that there's a tremendous difference between a pagan gospel, as he describes it, and the Christian gospel. And the pagan view of human nature is completely different from the Christian view. Man is basically good in the pagan viewpoint and can make progress in time through moral instruction, examples, and that sort of thing. Christianity has a completely different view. And so we'll come here to start our reading at the bottom of the screen that I have up in front of you. If you're using your book, it's on page 123, the top of 123. And we'll make some progress here. Excuse me just a moment. Dad's on the move again. Machen writes, at the root of the Christian attitude is a profound consciousness of the majesty of the moral law. But the majesty of the moral law is obscured in many ways at the present time, and most seriously of all in the sphere of education. Indeed, strangely enough, it is obscured in the sphere of education just by those who are becoming most keenly conscious of the moral bankruptcy of modern life. There's something radically wrong with our public education, it is said. An education that trains the mind without training the moral sense is a menace to civilization rather than a help. And something must quickly be done to check the impending moral collapse. To meet this need, various provisions are being made for moral training in our American public schools. Various ethical codes are being formed for the instruction of children who are under the care of the state. See, just a moment. But the sad thing is that these efforts are only making the situation tenfold worse. Far from checking the ravages of immorality, they are for the most part themselves non-moral at the root. Sometimes they are also faulty in details, as when a recent moral code indulges in a veiled anti-Christian polemic by a reference to differences of creed that will no doubt be taken as belittling and adopts the pagan notion of a human brotherhood already established, in distinction from the Christian notion of a brotherhood to be established by bringing men into a common union with Christ. But the real objection to some, if not all, of these efforts does not depend upon details. It depends rather upon the fact that the basis of the effort is radically wrong. The radical error appears with particular clearness in a children's morality code recently proposed by the Character Education Institution in Washington. I wonder if that's still in existence. I doubt it. That code contains 11 divisions, the subheadings of which are as follows. 1. Good Americans control themselves. 2. Good Americans try to gain and keep good health. 3. Good Americans are kind. 4. Good Americans play fair. 5. Good Americans are self-reliant. I wonder what happened to that. 6. Good Americans do their duty. 7th, good Americans are reliable. 8th, good Americans are true. 9, good Americans try to do the right thing in the right way. Sounds like something Bill Clinton would say. 10, good Americans work in friendly cooperation with fellow workers. 11, good Americans are loyal. Well, at least
when I was in 6th grade, I had a teacher who taught us do the right thing at the right time in the right way. She must have read that. She got that into her head. She pounded that into. She was a wonderful teacher, but she always said, "Do the right thing at the right time in the right way."
That's all sounds very good. The question is, what is the right thing?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where this thing falters. I'm kind of glad they had 11 statements here rather than 10 and just tried to replace the 10 commandments with these 10 good Americans. But anyway, you see this very much in our modern day, where there is a moral code being advanced in our public school system. It's a code that is consistent with pagan thought, naturalism, and it's hostile to Christianity. It operates on a wide variety of levels, but it's a moral code, and if you don't observe things the way they want you to, then you get ostracized and targeted and bullied. So the challenges that Machen was facing are even more so with us today. You can see some of the common threads, though, from what this original children's morality code had to say, and the kinds of things that we are hearing today. Particularly, good Americans do their duty. Well, what is their duty? Well, obey the country, obey the government is kind of your duty, and don't do otherwise. Do the right thing in the right way. Americans work in friendly cooperation with fellow workers. Be tolerant. We all got to get along. Good Americans are loyal to their government, really, their country. I'm not so sure we're loyal anymore if we are rejecting the Constitution, rejecting the founding fathers, and on a day of independence, we're declaring our independence of the American Constitution. So these kinds of things work their way into our American schools today. One thing I wanted to point out was the impact that this kind of a moral code has on young people growing up. When the moral code is the law says it's okay to have an abortion, then a lot of young people think, well, then it must be okay, and it's morally all right to do that because the government's watching over us. I was reading an article this past week by Carol Swain. Maybe you're familiar with her. She taught at Princeton and Vanderbilt University, distinguished senior fellow for constitutional studies with the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and an author and so forth. Here's the article and her picture a little bit there. She talks about her response to the decision to overthrow Roe versus Wade, Supreme Court decision, and she tells her experience of how, as a young woman, though married and having 2 children, she became pregnant and she wanted to end the pregnancy, so she got an abortion. And that had significant consequences for her, including the fact that she was not able to carry a child to term after that. She had no children beyond that. But one of the things that motivated her to get the abortion was, this is after having 2 children of her own, mind you, that the government said it was okay. It's legal. And so she just went along with that and had the abortion. So she says, at one point, I'm a bit reflective today because I know firsthand the shame and guilt that often comes from abortion decisions that women make with incomplete and sometimes false information. Then she talks about her experience. She said it was a secret I kept for more than 20 years, the fact that she had the abortion. The abortion was one of those dark actions I stuffed deep inside myself and pretended didn't happen. So the government said it's okay. But her conscience said otherwise. And God has written His law on our hearts, and no amount of legal statements can change that. So Machen continues, here we have morality regarded as a consequence of patriotism. The experience of the nation is regarded as the norm by which a morality code is to be formulated. This thoroughly non-moral principle appears in particularly crass form in point 2 of the institution's 5-point plan for character education in elementary school classrooms. The teacher, says the pamphlet, presents the children's morality code as a reliable statement of the conduct which is considered right among boys and girls who are loyal to Uncle Sam, and which is justified by the experience of multitudes of worthy citizens who have been Uncle Sam's boys and girls since the foundation of the nation. The teacher advises the children to study this morality code in order to find out what Uncle Sam thinks is right. There is no Uncle Sam. It's a fictitious character. So it's not Uncle Sam, it's the government. And you can see here the idea that children belong to the government, Uncle Sam, and they should be following what Uncle Sam has to teach them. This is the work of guys like John Dewey and who's the other guy? Jean-Jacques Rousseau and others who have tried to make changes in culture and make the state the parent of children rather than the biological parents, and shift authority over to the state. And so here in this children's morality code, we're to look at the experience of Americans in the past as a guide for moral conduct. Well, even today, people are looking at America's past and saying that that's problematic. There was slaveholding. There was all kinds of things going on. I saw a post today, or I posted something this past week about the death of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson on the same day, July the 4th, 50 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. An amazing work of God's providence. I'm not sure I can discern what it all means, but just kind of an amazing moment in history. And I was reading some of the comments that people made about the post before I put it on my page, and one person said, yeah, I'm from the area where Jefferson was raised. Was it Monticello. And he said, we know that Jefferson raped his slave girl and fathered 30-some different children. And so I don't know how true all of that is, but so we go back to American history and experience, and if you want, you can go back and you can find things that probably we should not be too proud about. Why do we look to American experience and not to a higher moral code, to Scripture, to God's revelation of how we are to live, and allow that to mold, guide, and direct our thinking, rather than the example of people in the past? And you can look at it in all different sorts of ways. Anyway. But what are those not infrequent cases where what Uncle Sam thinks is right is what God thinks is wrong? To say to a child, do not tell a lie because you are an American, like George Washington chopping down the cherry tree, I cannot tell a lie. How many times have we been told that story and urged to always tell the truth? To say to a child, do not tell a lie because you are an American, is at bottom an immoral thing. The right thing to say is, do not tell a lie because it is wrong to tell a lie. I do not think that it is unconstitutional I do not think that it is an unconstitutional intrusion of religion into the public schools for a teacher to say that. What Machen is pointing to is that work of the law upon the human heart, and saying we all have at heart a sense that lying is wrong. And so there's a moral component to lying. It's not just, this is not consistent with American experience, which is a non-moral statement. I mean, what's to say that American experience is moral? So you don't found morality on the fact of national citizenship. You found it upon what God says with regard to what's right. So we can always go beyond that and consider what took place in Nazi Germany and how the Nazis thought it was appropriate to round up the Jews and put them into gas chambers and kill them. That was the appropriate thing to do in Nazi Germany. In fact, I was reading another article which talked about how in Nazi Germany and in Mussolini's Italy, they put forward this sunny, optimistic picture of what Nazism is going to do. They have these bright young people going off and working for the state and doing all these kinds of things. But when the SS soldiers come in and they beat up an old man in the streets, or they're gassing Jews in a concentration camp, that doesn't get front page coverage. So the state presents an idealistic view of itself to persuade people to follow along, and then in the backside of things it's doing all kinds of evil behind that. And so don't always just listen to what Uncle Sam has to say about what's right. Have a critical view of that. Machen continues, in general, the holier-than-thou attitude towards other peoples, which seems to be implied in the program of the character education institution almost from the beginning to end, is surely at the present crisis in the history of the world. Got a book by Machen, a collection of essays that somebody put together from Machen on the topic of education, Christianity, and the state. So it clearly was something that was very important to Machen as he...
Van Til wrote a book too about that. Maybe he wrote it with Machen. I don't remember, but I read it a number of years ago. It was Machen, and maybe they put two books together. I can't remember.
Yeah. There's an emphasis on the formation of Christian schools. Towards the end of it, he's got a chapter on the Christian School, the Hope of America. So I think Machen was on the right track with that.
That's why Van Til helped to start Philmont.
Yeah, yeah. Brothers, my dad is just in one of those moods today where he's not going to be too happy. So let me read the next paragraph and we'll finish with that today, I think. In general, the holier-than-thou attitude toward other peoples, which seems to be implied in the program of the character education institution almost from beginning to end, is surely at the present crisis in the history of the world nothing short of appalling. The child ought indeed to be taught to love America and to feel that whether it is good or bad, it is our country. But the love of country is a very tender thing, and the best way to kill it is to attempt to inculcate it by force, and to teach in defiance of the facts that honesty and kindness and purity are peculiarly American virtues. This is surely harmful in the extreme. We blame Germany, rightly or wrongly, for this kind of thing. Yet now, in the name of patriotism, we advocate as truculent an inculcation of the same spirit as Prussia could ever have been accused of at its worst. Surely the only truly patriotic thing to teach the child is that there is one majestic moral law to which our own country and all the countries of the world are subject. So Machen was very much aware of the problems developing in Germany even before they metastasized into the Second World War and Adolf Hitler. But he saw the seeds of it at work there. So he's in between the First and Second World Wars, and he's observing things going on. So we have to, we are very concerned about our public schools and what's happening in them. They are currently, I think, indoctrination zones where our children are being brought up in a humanistic, pagan worldview, and it's, I think, as Rick was saying earlier, a Marxist socialist worldview, and it's having a tremendous impact on our culture today. We're seeing the fruit of that, and it's only increasing. So hopefully American people are waking up to what's going on in education, but this has been an ongoing battle for a generation at least. I remember back in the 80s with values clarification. I don't know if you remember that as part of the public school system's worldview. You don't teach children values, so you allow the children to discover their own values. So,
yeah. By the way, Machen's book was written in 1925.
Yeah.
This What is Faith? So it's 12 years before he died, and roughly 15 years or close to it before we get into World War II.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I don't know if maybe Hitler was starting to get active at that point in time. I don't know, but
he does mention Germany, but he might be thinking of World War I rather than World War II.
Yeah, I think that's it. He talks about Prussia and
so. But there was a battle against public education. I don't know if you heard me mention Rushduni's book, The Messianic Character of Public Education, but which I don't have my copy anymore. But I think Rushduni gave the history of how, I think it's Horace Mann and Dewey who were so involved in formulating our public education system. You got it there, Rich?
Messianic Character of American Education.
Yep.
Rushduni.
Yeah. I have a different cover on mine, but
yeah.